Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sofa Series Artist Spotlight. Today with me are the wonderful Ashley Bridgewater and Joe Mariglio. Howdy. How you
Hi.
doing?
Howdy.
Howdy. So you guys seem to be quarantining quite nicely together, or sheltering in place. We're not officially quarantined. Let's
Right.
not mince words. So how has your shelter in place been thus far?
We're pretty good. We're really fortunate. Um,
Yes.
we found that, we're safe, we're healthy, and
Mm-hmm.
most of the people we know, thank God, are.
Mm-hmm.
So we found that settling in, it kind of brought this opportunity for creative energy too
Yeah.
at
Hmm.
moments.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. And this has been a great opportunity to work with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I feel I feel like I've been a lot more busy now,
Mm-hmm.
the work has not stopped for me, and
Mm-hmm.
then simultaneously we're also trying to manage a garden, and make sure that, food, water, electricity, things stay on.
Mm-hmm.
So plenty of things to occupy uh, my mind on
Mm-hmm.
things. As I'm sure is true for everybody. I mean, everybody's sort of taking this in a different way. It's sort of hitting everybody in a different way.
It's
Um,
hard to sort of like parse out like the headspace for contemplating the severity and the kind of overwhelming bigness.
yeah,
You know
huge.
that I mean there have been bugs that have gotten out. There have been crises of health that have not quite really jumped ponds as much as this, and so the sort of global impact of it all feels just like it's too much.
Yeah,
It can be too much for a person to to even think of.
yeah,
Like I can barely contemplate that a billion of anything exists.
yeah,
You know, and that billions of people are affected. Really, it just is too much. So I wonder how. I mean, you're in the Ashley is as a mindfulness. I don't know. Do we call you experts or
Sure.
practitioner?
Yeah, practitioner.
How do
Yeah,
you
and as
deal?
this moment in time, like there are so many layers to it, and so many different kinds of moments to be had
Mm-hmm.
in digesting what is happening. So, we use a lot of discernment with the kinds of news that we listen to
Mm-hmm.
and
and
amount.
an amount.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it definitely, there are big emotions around even the little bit that we allow in, and it's an exercise in being with it and letting yourself feel whatever comes, and it'll affect your behavior, if you're in a space, a compassionate space, and there are things we can do, even like in the case of meta loving kindness, we
Mm-hmm.
can send well wishes to others, and it might seem like, oh, that's not really doing anything, but that affects the makeup of your brain, the connections in your brain. If you're repeating these compassionate, loving kindness thoughts, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to rewire and your brain, and it'll affect your behavior. It'll affect the people you interact with. um, so little things that we can do, um, it puts us in the place of compassion versus like the empathetic response, which kind of puts you in the place of the sufferer suffering along with.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that especially right now, practices like metta are really, really helpful to keeping sanity and ability to keep going and doing and offering what we have to offer,
Mm-hmm.
because it can be paralyzing. We've certainly have all felt that with.
It's immense. Yeah, yeah. It is definitely immense, and it's hard to not to get into this. And I don't want to like guilt. Like
Yeah,
that I feel oh, but everything around me is perfectly fine, you know, and that there are so many out beyond me, out of my reach, that are absolutely not, that are, you know, I have the privilege of internet, I have the privilege of shelter, I have the privilege of being able to obtain food, you know, that it's hard to not feel the guilt, you know.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one that comes up for us too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's also the fear. I mean, you know, and for me, the way that sort of manifests is like I overdo. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm like, oh
You
God,
really?
as much
Can't
as I'm
imagine.
shocking, you know, like changing, you know, all of a sudden, you know, I don't know, putting a light in the room is like this, you know, crusade against, you know, dissolution into anarchy, and it just everything takes on this ridiculous pathos for me. So I think it's also possible, you know. Yes,
That
it's
was a
certainly
stage, though. That has definitely changed. That was like early quarantine. And it was
we
like,
need a
hey!
freezer.
I have a big freezer now.
Yeah, tone it down.
I mean, yeah. So I think I think that a certain degree of kind of stepping back and looking at not looking at yourself in this navel gazing kind of way, but looking at yourself from a perspective of just giving yourself space um, can prevent both extremes, right? This overdoing and then this freeze, you know, or trying to escape or pretend it's not happening. You know, those are all coping mechanisms, and they're not effective, but they seem effective. And I'm speaking from experience with them, considerable experience.
With coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, maybe talk a little bit more about Metta. You do introduce it at the beginning of your piece, but you know, speak a little bit about that. So, what is the word? Where does it come from, and how did you come into this practice anyway?
Great questions. Well, I'll start with metta itself. It translates to friendliness or benevolence, loving kindness, and an earlier translation, or an earlier word, mitta, it means friend in Pali Sanskrit. Mit by itself means to grow fat with friendliness,
I
and
love that. Yeah.
yeah. So this is a cultivative practice, and it's expanding that loving awareness gradually outward to more and more. And the idea is a feeling of interconnectedness that potentially can build. But with that said, the first time I practiced metta, I hated it because I had just got the hang of vipassana, where you're sitting and working with what arises, but bringing the attention back. And I was like, oh, now you're asking me to talk to myself
To
say
contemplate.
words,
Yeah.
and like it's gonna bring up all this stuff. So at first I was like, no, this is whatever, that's cool, but I'll just stay over here for a while. And eventually, I think a moment that I had was I ran into somebody who I had extended the phrases toward as my neutral person, so somebody that I didn't know that well. And I remembered that I had, and there was just like this heart-opening feeling around them, and I was just like, oh, hi, and I smiled a little brighter, and I didn't start a big convo, but I engaged with them, smiled at them, and same thing back, where I might have been like more brief with them. So a lot of times, Sharon Salzberg, who brought this practice to the West, will talk about this practice as an opportunity for planting seeds. It doesn't mean that you're going to sit down, practice metta, and just feel this benevolence toward everybody and yourself.
That's insufferable.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when you're in a mood, and like I even think about this practice, I'm just like, ugh. Like, I had this repulsive feeling toward it initially because I'm in this mood that's so different. So,
Yeah.
But she talks about planting seeds, and you know, trying this practice even a few times, there's that potential for it to have an effect, a positive effect on you, and maybe give you this new perspective and lens to understand that we're all in this together. You know, to be human is to suffer in big and little ways. And yeah, so just understanding that everybody is doing the best they know how to be happy, and you might be more inclined to come to that realization when you're in an interaction with somebody, and you won't get on that, you know, that wheel, that hamster wheel of like, oh my God, they cut me off, they were so rude to me in the store. You might just be like, wow, like maybe their life experience hasn't taught them to be considerate, or they're having a bad day, and you're like, oh, that, you know, that's probably, there's some suffering in that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how it kind of develops this perspective. And over the last, I've only been practicing this for about 3 years, but it very much has changed the way I interact with others, and how quickly I can kind of return to an equilibrium with myself even, and people. So your relationship to yourself is another tricky one with this practice. Like you're wishing yourself to be happy, healthy, and you know, we really tangle this judgment of self, especially in our culture. So yeah, I mean,
right, yeah, the chase for perfection, which is just like a myth. There is no there is no such thing as perfection in anything, you know. So yeah, it just becomes, it can always be toxic.
Yeah, and it's hard to even like understand, like, oh, it's my birthright to be happy and experience safety, and all this. There's nothing I need to do to earn the right to be happy. Like, aren't I? You know, shouldn't I be like more beautiful, or you know, have won a Grammy by now or whatever?
Yeah,
There's
sort
nothing.
Nothing. Well, how did you come into this practice, right? So you started off as you were into your degrees in education,
right? Music education, actually. So I went to Temple University over on the East Coast.
Great music school.
Yeah, loved it. My experience there was amazing. And then I taught for several years, both in the Philly area and then up in New York City. I taught at a charter school in Harlem for 4.5 years. And I would say that had a great impact on me. And I
how so?
I guess, I mean, you're face to face. We had a lot of kids coming from difficult home situations, and it was most kids that I was encountering and working with, and coming into that culture as a guest, really. I mean, kids are aware that you weren't raised there, and you're aware of it, and like talk about like certain tangles of guilt, or you know, it's just so many things to learn from each other. So I just really reference that experience in all my practice, and like in connecting to humans. And but I've been going to yoga because, you know, this was a long day. It was like a 7:30 to 4:30 school, and it was year round, so not really summer breaks. And yoga and dance are the two things. And I started meditating, probably, it might have been even like Deepak and Oprah, I think. And they would have these, like, you know, those free sessions every once in a while. And it was just the right amount of time where I could get the connection over the Brooklyn Bridge. And then, like, continue, like, it would download and it would continue all the way up to Harlem. And so I would, like, meditate before work. And I was just like, oh, there's something to mindfulness. And at my end of my time there, I was Googling, like, what can I go get my master's degree in? And I was like, is there a master's in mindfulness, like, anywhere? And I Googled it, and there was one place, and
lo and behold, there it is.
Yeah, and through their program, I mean, it's a great design of curriculum there, and just have a really broad experience. And so Metta was something that we practiced, I think, in Foundations of Mindfulness and a couple other classes. And once I realized what it was doing for me, it was just like, oh, thesis material, inspiration of my own personal business. Because I feel like a lot of practices come back around to this, you know, this practice of loving kindness and this interconnected feeling. And I just love it. It's a great place to start. So yeah, I just believe in it. This guy got him doing it.
Yeah, well, speaking of that guy, how did how did you two meet?
How did we meet?
Well,
Is there a clean
I
story?
I had been
audiences.
here. I was interning at UCSD Center for Mindfulness, and I went home, and I was either going to move here or find a job there again, and so I decided to live here. And once I was teaching at Del Mar Union School District for a year, teaching mindfulness and music kind of fused together.
Oh,
It was
cool.
awesome at Del Mar Heights, and I thought, oh, you know what? It's a good time to start dating. So I Cupided. I stumbled
Yeah.
upon this guy, or maybe I don't remember exactly, but it was like, oh, we both, have a music degree, and like we're in Encinitas, and we're from Pennsylvania, and he's from Reading. I'm from Hershey. That's only an hour apart. Same age. It was kind of like, oh, well, we should definitely at least meet. I think that's positive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a good first date. And
The rest is history.
that's history. And like, it felt like an old friend.
Yeah.
Because that was my first OkCupid
Date ever.
experience, and so
I've been on hundreds.
Listen, yeah, that is not what it's like.
This is going way too smoothly. I think I need to try and fail a couple more times.
Yeah.
But I, spared a lot of the toils. Not to.
Well, I mean, once you find your person, you find the I don't know. I think you just kind of like pretty instantaneously, like, oh, this one,
Yeah.
there's something else about this.
It's
This
like coming home. It was
Yeah.
interesting.
It's like,
Yeah.
Are you sure we don't know each other?
So, Joe, let's talk a little bit about your practice. So where you're from, also from Pennsylvania, and what brought you out to San Diego, and what is your artistic practice really kind of rooted in?
Yeah, I mean, I was living in New York at the time, and that would have been 2010, and I had a master's degree, and I couldn't get work flipping pizzas. I couldn't get work doing anything at that time. It was a scary time. I was working as a sound engineer, and it was extremely cutthroat, and didn't have much success with building a life on top of that. So all the while, I kind of set up applications, whatever you call that, sent out applications. And, I mean, really, I knew that I was interested in Miller and Miller's work.
Miller Puckett, for those who don't know, he's amazing.
I just felt this great affinity towards him and Tom, to be sure. And so I just, I told them that, and I applied, and the rest is history. I don't know. I came out to San Diego. I guess that would have been later in 2010.
Yeah. And you so you did the PhD in computer music, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what sorts of describe a little bit about the kinds of tomfoolery.
There's a lot of tomfoolery.
There are occasionally like drills involved, and lots of epoxy and lots of like hazardous chemicals.
Every once in a while.
Every now and then.
Smashing TVs.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess when it's funny, I kind of divide my time at UCSD in two, because I had that side to me for sure, and it was really that part of me that I just wasn't sure if I wanted to be a researcher, and I'm still not. I'm still really not a researcher. I mean, I am sort of, but I'm not an academic researcher, and I don't think I ever want to be. And it's it's just my personal affinities, and I think so. A lot of the more performance-based aspects of my practice kind of reflected a little bit of that tension, or I have many what we would call maybe like anger things, block myself off and get frustrated a lot of times, and the result is this anger or stress, fear, it became kind of a medicine for me. It became sort of like this way that I could deal with some of those difficult things that were going on in a way that was, that provided at least momentary relief from some of the stress and painful emotions that were going on around that, around those things. I guess the other half is, I was sort of trying to figure out. I mean, I spent the last 4 years of my time at UCSD, not even at UCSD. I was working in industry as a software engineer, and just at times pretending to write, and at times actually writing a dissertation. And
I think even those of us who only spent our time at the university spent a lot of time just pretending to write.
That's fair. I mean, I did that before I left.
Yeah.
It's much the same. But I got embroiled in this one particular, I guess, math problem, I guess you could call it. And it ended up just, it was a really wonderful thing for me because it was so stimulating. And at times when I lived in Southern California, I mean, really it just ended up just being, I would go over to Miller Puckett's place and we'd just drink tea and talk about this problem. And it was really enjoyable, and it allowed me to still feel sort of connected to UCSD without having to deal with parking. And it, I mean, to this day, I still find I didn't answer all the aspects of this problem.
That's okay.
No, it's great. It's still something that I think about from time to time. It's really lovely.
How did you guys together kind of conceive this? It's performance, this piece, this sort of collaborative work. So it's on the surface, it feels very disparate, right? So the sound worlds, Joe, that you explore can maybe often be maybe misconstrued as like can feel like threatening, it's like the noise it's like, get out of the house, girl, he's in there,
I think the way you experience sound is just unique too,
right?
Whereas I'm really sensitive to sound, so
especially
this is great.
Amplitude.
Like amplitude. So.
Match made in heaven.
I went to a Sun O concert. It was a mistake.
Oh shit!
I was like, I'm gonna go back there for a little bit. I'm sorry. But we started this one off where, Joe was aware that like in this time of quarantine, that there were a lot of things I was personally working on with my practice and wanting to further develop my business, and then he's wonderful in with the synthesizers. And, like I've really grown to appreciate and truly enjoy many aspects of the sounds that Joe makes.
Yeah.
We recently actually got a piano too, and so Joe's been playing that a little bit too, and we've been bringing in some of the practices, Tibetan practices, and like turning them into songs on the piano. So it's a real creative energy. And when we started this project, we began with I looked up how many hertz is like that tone that's supposed to make you like throw you into a positive attitude or something. There's like I think it's 432.
Yeah, that's
something.
What people say.
I just looked it up and like, is that like A or F? I don't know. We played a chord, and then so I had a little bit of input as to the sound that was being made, and then he just took it from there. So we tried to like ground it in like a warmth, and you built from there. And then I kind of let him.
What you hear at the final result, we did this 6 or 7 individual
we
times.
Had some technical issues, so we're like, we thought we were done. Let's redo the whole
thing. Oh shit!
We tried to record it using Ashley's laptop, and didn't work out. So we ended up But we had done it by the time the one that you're like that is on your site is the last one that we did, and so it's sort of a culmination of all these different prior takes on my end. You know, so we recorded everything, and I did it you know, I did it live each time. But then we stitched it all together in post with all these different versions, because every once in a while, you know, something would come up. It's a lot of it's feedback that I'm using, and so you know, sometimes it's just not the feedback doesn't do the same thing on different.
It's volatile, right? Yeah.
And you know, we were doing a little tiny bit of processing on Ashley's voice as well, and so those things had to be merged in a way that made sense.
How are you considering the sound as it like integrated in the like the vocalization of like Ashley kind of guiding us through this journey? Is it an amplification of that? Is it something that is maybe more introverted or introspective? Is it like accompaniment? And like, how do you sort of think about the sound world?
How did I think of it when
Yeah.
I did it?
Yes.
Because you know, it can be all those things to people as they're experiencing it. I think it even through the process of performing it along with Ashley, you know, I'm actually, my sound stuff is all over there in the garage, so I couldn't even maintain, you know, line of sight. So I was going all by sound, and just listening to the words Ashley was saying, and then you know, for a lot of it, for me, I think, and we talked about this at length, you know, does this even make sense for us to do? Should we do this at all? Like, should it just be all grounding in sense of hearing? Why pair, you know, even if we were to do a
practice.
Yeah, or but like, even with a cultivative practice, like why metta, you know? And the way we ended up looking at it was that sound can be a great sensory anchor. It can be a great thing that calls you back to the present moment, to your attention, and so we have this like one pointed focus, you know, that's going, which is the drone, and it's sort of ever changing and all this. But and it's contingent too, right? It's reacting and responding. It's not just
A single,
you know, necessarily.
Yeah.
It's sort of clamoring for attention at times. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not there.
Yeah.
And clamoring for attention in that way by not being there. At least that was what it was for me. And I think, but so there's that, and then there's also, you know, the dissolution aspect, which, you know, chronologically speaking, I guess, you know, in a practice like this comes kind of later, you know, so you're doing all of this one-pointed focused awareness, you're cultivating these feelings of all kinds of feelings, but you're cultivating these statements of goodwill and planting them in, you know, into yourself and into the world. But then at a certain point you pause, and there's this vast openness, and that's the space in which all of these things are permitted to arise. And so I tried to capture that, but in a very intuitive and, you know, in the moment kind of way. I was just
the empty space, or like, you know, the space between notes, or
Ground.
Yeah, right. That there's like, but there's also cultivated in meditative practices, and even in like, for example, some Buddhism, right? That to say something over and over again, right? So there's repetition. There's lots of repetition in the text that you are saying, and so it's that like every time that you say something anew, it is a new thing, and that all of the time in between the utterances, it's where the thing, the idea, the thing that you emit out there really can change and grow, and it's sort of with you and outside of you, kind of all together. And so I thought it was a really interesting approach to go from like drone music, which I think has very much the same effect, because it's got the stabilizing thing, and then it develops in within these longer periods, and it develops in a way that maybe you don't even perceive, right? That eventually it's like, oh, how did we get here? we were there a second ago, you know. So it's sort of playing on both practices, I think, in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not used to doing that practice with drone too, so it was a good reminder as somebody facilitating the practice, but I was also very much doing the practice, and I don't ever facilitate something that I'm not actually doing, but it was just a great reminder to be with whatever is there right now, and you know, there's change in the body and nature of thoughts, or you know, you might realize you're actually feeling a specific emotion, and there were just so many opportunities to kind of like massage the experience with the breath, even like oh, what I'm hearing, and just like here I am with this, and bringing this awareness to it. And you know, you practice this awareness, you will take it, you will surely take it off into the world. So yeah, it's really, we definitely want to do more sound off.
That was my next question.
Oh yeah,
girl.
She's like that.
Yeah.
We also practice Tibetan Buddhism. And there's a lot of visualization, and so we've even, you know, we've spoken about like how could we even like paint this with sound.
Oh sure. Oh yeah, I think it sort of invites sort of synesthesia, right? So like sound and color and like it's yeah,
so much to explore, and it's definitely felt like a place to kind of start with that, and you know, many places to go and learn more. You know.
So yeah, I mean the quarantine or the whatever shelter in place thing, right? We have this opportunity, I think, those of us who can, you know, look inward, you know, we should. And you know, it's a I mean, yes, there's pain, there's stress, there's fear, there's anger, there's all these things. But we also have been told to pause. You know, we've been given this opportunity really to pause, and you know, we don't. It's so rare. I mean, really, that happens. Something like that happens.
I wish it didn't take a pandemic to do it. You know, that's a fucking bummer.
You know, the other thing is, like, I say that we never have these opportunities. Oh, for me. But we do have these.
We
opportunities
totally
all the
do.
time.
Yeah, we totally do.
You know.
We must remember that we do. Too.
Yeah, you're at the Brooklyn Tunnel, making your way to Harlem. You know, there it is. Yeah, and I sort of take that at like, even in as a Californian, we're so sort of attached to our transportation. We're just like we can't not drive everywhere, and so that has always been my I had turned that into my own little sacred space. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna just sort of be in this box for like the next 30 minutes. All right, how do I feel today? You know, where am I going to, and what is it gonna, you know, so that I could take that as like my little opportunity. But I think you're right that because everybody has to slow down. I think that it can be used for good. And then it can be used to help. It can be used to be generous. It can be used to be introspective. And I find it interesting that like, because all of our interactions are now mediated, right? That I have to like, you know, look through my device to interact with anybody. That I've actually like been turning it off more, you know,
Yeah.
not going to it so much as my source of entertainment anymore, that I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go walk for 30 minutes. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna read. I'm gonna, do a puzzle that I find that fascinating, that people are now like actively turning it off,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Beautiful.
It's super
And
interesting.
gardening.
And gardening, you guys have a
Gardening.
killer garden.
Outside of it, so I mean, it's just like feels so much more potent. Like it's like whoa.
We also we've been visited by so many birds. I mean, they
Yay.
won't shut up. It's beautiful.
The mockingbirds that
It's so
sing
loud.
all day,
All
night. I'm a
night.
little surprised it's not happening right now, but
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's this family of birds that moved in right under our, and,
yeah, we were like, oh, the babies
the
are
babies
older.
start
They're all hanging
fledging
out.
and-
Oh wow, they're back to
Oh, now
make more
they're-
babies.
It's
It's like a big deal.
National Geographic all of a sudden.
That's great. That's great.
But it's I
Yeah.
think I think the interesting thing is that we've been asked as a culture to pause. you know,
Yeah.
and maybe we can see some of the positives in that and some of the opportunities really in that.
Yeah.
And if we got so hung up in the fact like there is a lot of suffering right now, and there'll continue to be.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can all be of benefit to others. But if we're like, oh man, I just feel so bad because like, who are we to be this happy at moments? Like we shouldn't be this happy.
Well, we're
we
not
should
happy
be
all the time.
No, but
Let's
like
be
at those
honest
good
here.
moments where you're thinking, wow, like I'm having a good day, and I know there
Yeah.
are people all over the world that are really suffering right now. Being aware of that is really important.
Yeah.
But not muting your joyful moments either. Like
How are you going to help anybody if you're muting your own joy and satisfaction and your own the goodness that's inside of us? That is talk about birthright. That's your birthright
Yeah.
right there. And how are I mean if you don't have if you don't have the right glasses on, how are you going to see the problem to fix it in the first place?
Right.
You can be running around like me, trying to change a light bulb and thinking that it's doomsday, and if I don't change this light bulb, and shouting and knocking things it doesn't help anybody, and much less me. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It doesn't help anybody.
Doesn't help
So-
the light bulb.
Doesn't
That's
help.
damn sure.
Certainly. So, I mean, yeah,
yeah, it's hard to feel helpless, but
we're
What
not in
you
a
can
culture.
do.
That's one of our exiles, right?
Yeah.
We're in a culture where being helpless is, it's unacceptable. It's this shadow thing. It's this exile. It's this thing that you cast out. Oh yeah. I mean, when you're helpless, just do more yoga or
Bootstraps.
Yeah.
My favorite word.
This mantra, and it's like, no. How about
No.
I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do in this situation.
Yeah.
And nothing anybody can do, and face that.
Yeah.
Don't turn away from that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are aware though, and feel compassionately and I'm sure that some people are developing or they're exercising their capacity for compassion right now, and we can hope that kind of turns in a positive way as
Yeah.
we go back into the normal.
I don't ever want to go back to.
No.
No, I'm
Yeah.
pretty deliriously optimistic that I feel. I mean, of course, feelings aren't facts, but I do sort of feel that I think because everybody is taking the time to really consider what is important, what is a quality of life, what really actually drives a good quality of life, and that we can maybe turn away from the consumerism and become more compassionate, exercise more care, more kindness, and I feel hopeful that is where most of us want the society to go. That's my hope anyway.
So,
Good.
there's power in numbers.
We're gonna do it, guys. My friends, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's Yeah, it's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Good.
And we look forward to seeing you more soon.
More soon.
And hopefully in person at some point.
At some point, sure. At some point. Thank you guys again.